art of fundraising includes engaging the donor, which isn't always easy. Hi, I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and this is the first day from the fundraising school, and I'm joined today by Dr. Gene Tempel, our founder, who is now the Dean Emeritus of the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and an absolute master fundraiser. And Gene, thanks for being back with us on these podcasts. And I know a topic that is dear to your heart is donor engagement. And donor engagement is not always easy. What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, I just go back to the very beginning and say sometimes one way of defining fundraising is the difficult art of engaging donors with your cause. Mm-hmm. It's easy to say things like, fundraising is a gentle art of teaching people the joy of giving, as Hank Rosso did, and
right.
Sarah Conrath, our wonderful faculty member, has now proving through her research. But it's also talking about fundraising as a difficult work of engaging people in the cause. Paul Schervish said that people reach philanthropic identification when they can see themselves in those who are being helped. That is, how is it that people come to see those the organization's clients or our constituents who are being helped? And that is by engaging more closely with the donor. He says through communities of participation where they can see themselves among a group of supporters who are also helping that cause. And I like now to think even more closely to this notion through the work of Noah Dresner, who who's introduced this concept of philanthropic mirroring and proved that if in fact the very specific case of a donor, whether that person be a gay person, a woman, a black person, so that any way in which you can represent the organization's constituents and make a case around constituents that will mirror the person from whom the gifts are being sought, that helps engage the person more closely. So it's the difficult work of engaging people in the cause.
And so, Gene, by engagement, we're not referring to the annual fund where somebody's receiving the letter, coming to an event, hearing about us on social media, et cetera. This is now when the relationship is deepening, right? Is this what we mean by engagement?
I mean, it can in fact start with the letter, where the person becomes engaged with the organization's cause through having the letter really in fact, help the person see him or herself in the person around whom the case is being made. But then beyond that, the work becomes more difficult. In fact, it's about how do we bring the $1,000 donors together around some event where they can become more deeply engaged with people in the organization, with others in the organization who are helping the cause. So that as the work becomes more as the donors' gifts become larger, the organization needs to engage the person more deeply.
Gene, we teach that with philanthropy. Each of us can have our individual values, and we can express those, and we can have an impact with those. But through philanthropy, we come together in voluntary associations. We associate with others who have similar values, and then that can help us have an even more exponential impact with our philanthropy. As you're talking about engagement in communities of participation, my understanding correctly, certainly there's that common bond of values, but then you also said we need to see people who look like us, or we need to be able to relate to people who look like us. So it's the values plus this idea of identity. Is that correct?
I think so. Paul Schervish and other sociologists who use who worked off of what's called social identity theory. So, we can eventually see ourselves in the person who's being helped no matter what. Noah Dresner says we come to this more closely if we can in fact see ourselves very distinctly in the cause that's being helped, around the cause that's being helped. But it's beyond this. Let's talk a little bit about these communities of participation. Yeah. So if we're at a theater, it's easy for us to engage people. We can invite people into the theater. We can invite them into the costume shop. We can invite them to meet with the actors, that kind of thing. But it's more difficult when if we're operating a soup kitchen. How do we do that? How do we engage people in how we're helping people and still be respectful to those who are being helped? So we have to be very careful about that. So it's easier for some organizations than it is for others. You and I could be invited in to have lunch with our scholarship recipient. but more difficult if you're operating a soup kitchen, or if you're operating a homeless shelter, or if you're going out on the streets and ministering to those homeless people on the streets. And how do you do that with respect? So I talk about this. There are different kinds of organizations have different challenges in trying to engage people, but it certainly might be possible. It might be possible for an organization like Outrun the Sun to engage people as volunteers to help pass out sunscreen at the track, at the Indianapolis 500, for example. And that might be the only way they have of engaging people.
Yeah, it's a great point, because we don't want people to experience sunburn or skin cancer
That's
to
correct.
be able to get engaged with that particular nonprofit. I know one of the other strategies you'd like to talk about is donor group recognition. What does that mean?
Well, these donor recognition groups are all about engaging people with a cause. And so you can have a higher level, you can have $1,000 donor recognition groups, $10,000 donor recognition groups, $100,000 lifetime donor recognition groups, et cetera. And organizations tend to think of these things as ways to recognize donors. But on the other side, they really are ways of engaging people. And perhaps the $1,000 donors, all as a cumulative group, had a certain kind of impact on the organization. Well, they should be invited to see that impact. Let's say that there were $100,000 spent to do something particular inside the organization, some capital improvement or something, or they provided a certain number of school lunches, for that money. They should be able to see what it is that happened. But then the $10,000 donors, the $100,000 donors, that's another level of engagement. So think of these not just as recognition groups, but as ways to help build what, going back to this communities of participation, ways in which people can come together, people with shared values can come together to see the impact that those folks have on the organization.
And donor recognition groups, you're talking about something much more deeper than listing names of donors by giving level at the back of an annual report.
That's correct, yeah. Something very active that the organization does to bring those donors together, so that they're involved in the organization. Perhaps it's a reception at the organization's site where the donors can meet 2 or 3 recipients who can talk about how they were helped by the organization. They can come together to see a performance, that kind of thing. And then, Bill, I want to talk about going from those donor recognition groups. I mean, the ultimate way to engage a major donor is on your board of directors. Engaging somebody as a board member, so that they begin to take ownership of the organization. And let's structure this so that, in fact, some of our major donors are members of our board of directors. Not all of them, but some of them are members of our board of directors. And they begin to take ownership. And it's through that ownership and through seeing the organization up close and becoming legally responsible for that organization that perhaps that's where the $1 million gift comes, or that's how the planned gift comes. So that's one way of engaging. And then if somebody doesn't want to join a board of directors, there are still ways to engage people in very special ways. Perhaps they become engaged as members of a president's cabinet, where they don't meet on a regular basis, but they're just consulted on serious issues, or brought in to discuss strategic planning or environmental impacts of the organization, those kinds of things.
One of my favorite stories is a children's museum that engaged their board and their higher level donors to go on a fossil dig in the Dakotas. Put them on a plane, flew them to the Dakotas, let them sift around and find some fossils and bones, and the resulting dinosaurs are now part of the museum. And I know when I teach for the fundraising school, I encourage people, you might not have a fossil dig near you, and that might not be appropriate to your mission, but how can we apply that to our context, whatever that might be? And that sounds to me, that's what you're trying to teach us here about engagement.
That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, Bill, is that organization engaged those people in a fossil dig. Those fossils are now part of the museum. Those people's work is now in the museum. Yeah. Those are your major donors.
And what does that mean for you? You need to be able to contextualize that to your nonprofit as you engage donors, certainly in those very initial ways to bring them into your organization, but then deepen those relationships over time that can lead to consistent giving and perhaps even higher levels of giving that can strengthen and fortify the good work of your nonprofit organization. These are the types of materials that we teach in our public courses, our Principles and Techniques of Fundraising course, the Major Gifts course, the Capital Campaigns course, and of course the 4 new courses that are part of our Certificate of Fundraising Leadership. All this information, we have these 20 courses taught in 18 U.S. locations. All of this is available online at philanthropy.iupui.edu/the Fundraising School. You're also going to find information about our quarterly webinars and, of course, these free podcasts. And don't forget, the Fundraising School can come to you anywhere in the world, as we can provide custom training that's tailored specifically for the needs and expertise level of your philanthropic organization. Again, that website, philanthropy.iupui.edu/the Fundraising School. I know I'm always highly engaged when I have an opportunity to learn from Dr. Gene Tempel. I hope that you have as well. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are now more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.